Hello, everyone. Really glad to see you all here. My immense gratitude to each one of you for your presence in today's session on combating loneliness for a healthy living. Loneliness is a universal human emotion with the experience unique to each individual and existing across all ages. Loneliness is strongly known to be linked with mental and physical health and our overall well being. Though solitude in itself can be empowering as well, we need to identify the symptoms of loneliness also at the right time and deal with it in a better way. It might help us, it might help people around us. Quite an important aspect that has come up during the pandemic as well. So, today, in chapter 8 of the Chit Chat Talk series, Dr. Vidya and Dr. Prachi will take us to this journey of understanding loneliness, how it can affect our health, how it affects many more people than we might think, and how can we cope with it in an effective manner. Dr. Vidya is a homeopath consultant and a strong proponent of positive mental health. She firmly believes in the idea of happiness not being a gift, but a solution to all our problems. Dr. Prachi Singh is a consulting homeopathic psychiatrist, very active in the field of mental health and well being. She has also been associated with alcohol and drug rehabilitation centers, helping people overcome addiction and step towards a healthy well being. To give you a little bit of introduction about the Chit Chat Talk series, we came up with this initiative few months back from soulsaanch to introspect core topics that positively impact our well-being and the world around us. We have conducted open space and expert sessions on self-care, self-love, the importance of social work, extending compassion towards animals, community animals, and understanding the management of stress for a better health, the importance of sleep, and also building immunity the Ayurvedic way. Sanj has a focus on preventive mental health care. We are dealing with different topics related to that. So, Dr. Vidya, would you like to add on something to this point?
I think that's one thing that these initiatives are really smashing it. I really like the fact that you are approaching a lot of things from a point of prevention and spreading awareness before it becomes a morbidity and before it becomes something that you really need to treat. I think a vast majority of the cases can be, they can stop becoming cases just by spreading a certain level of awareness and understanding. So yeah, absolutely on point. It's an amazing topic and something that I think a lot of people will relate to.
Thank you, Dr. Vidya. So, for the people who have joined in, we'll start with our session. And if you have any point that comes to your mind through our discussion, you can please mention it on the chat. Please feel free. It's empathetic ears to listen, actually. So you can share anything, and if you have any questions that comes up your mind, you can mention it during the chat, and then we can take it towards the end of the session. And let's be on mute while one person is talking. Let all of us maintain ourselves on mute. So my first question would be to Dr. Vidya. What do we mean by loneliness, and what is the difference between being alone and being lonely?
Uh, there is a marginal difference for sure. I think the main perspective is to understand that loneliness is a very subjective feeling, whereas being alone or solitude, as you would like to call it, is the actual physical absence of people around you, right? And loneliness is known, I think everybody goes through it at one point of time in their life, at least. I mean, if you're lucky, you must have gone through it a very few times in your life. But definitely, it is a transient emotion. It's a very unpleasant emotion. There are a lot of factors that contribute to it occurring. And solitude nowadays is starting to be viewed as quite a positive thing because it is associated with a lot of things like lack of restriction, discovery of oneself. So they are related at times, but then for a vast majority, I think loneliness pertains to a lot as far as a person's feelings are concerned, the perceptions are concerned. Yes, I think you've heard of the phrase being alone in a crowd. Yes, so it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to feel loneliness only when you are without people, but you, in fact, very often tend to feel more lonely when you are surrounded by people you don't have a connection with or associate with. Yeah.
I was actually about to say that during the starting of the session that being lonely Doesn't just mean that you are alone and there's no one around you. One can feel lonely in presence of a lot of people as well. And Dr. Prachi, do you like to add something? I saw your mic on, that's why.
No, I think she's covered the basic difference between what is loneliness and what is solitude.
Okay. So the next question from my side, Dr. Vidya, would be how prevalent are feelings of loneliness among people living in the world today? Because it is something that we have been hearing for quite a while now, and especially during the pandemic, it has been quite talked about. So what would your thoughts be on the same?
As far as actual studies are concerned, they are showing that it is a rising problem. But it's a bit of a variable way to look at it. Numbers don't always talk about the intensity of the things that people face. Okay, I think that's something that all of us in the medical fraternity definitely know. But even otherwise, you know that numbers tend to lie sometimes. Okay, and loneliness is something that today's generation is feeling with a far more intensity than the previous generation for multiple factors. We will get to that in a bit. But one thing I feel is that the previous generation was, I think they were like working ants where they just kind of put their head down and they would do work without really, the entire mantra of the previous generation was to just keep at it, grit your teeth, get through it, everything will be all right. Whereas in today's generation, I think we have the liberty, and now what is turning out to be a sort of, I wouldn't call it curse. That's just, it's too strong a word. But then we do have the ability to choose. Okay, we do have the liberty to relax, calm down, and view our options. So that is somehow backfiring on our generation quite a bit. And the second factor is the awareness. Okay, I think a lot of people from the past few decades would not have even identified what they were feeling, but our generation has the good fortune to know exactly what the emotions are and what they're going through. So yes, you do see that the awareness of loneliness is also amplified along with just the cases of loneliness. You have a lot of factors that come up. I think it's very common to know that one is the nuclearization of families. Earlier on, used to live in large communities, used to live in large social circles. So now the actual physical distancing and having to deal with only one or two people on a day-to-day basis is attributing to it. And of course, the demon that everybody likes to blame, the internet, yes, and digitalization. Yeah, so it is contributing a lot for people not making an effort to establish strong connections and being very sensitive to negative feedback. Okay, we will go about, go further down as far as causes are concerned. But then yes, it is definitely on the rise, not just because of actual numbers of cases increasing, but the sheer amplitude and awareness of the emotion that perpetuates during this entire process.
Thank you, Dr. Vidya. So my next question was also on the same lines, that what are the major factors contributing towards this loneliness? You spoke about a little on it already. So would you like to add something more on that?
So before I go to the causes per se, because most of the causes are interrelated, it's very difficult to delineate one specific cause. It's not like a lot of medical conditions where you have, acha, this trauma is there, cancer is there. Okay, those are the specific causes. But loneliness has a lot to do with a person's perception of the situation that he or she is undergoing. Okay, so before that, I would like to establish what connection should be and what a healthy relationship is. Okay, so first thing you need to understand is humans are meant to be independent people, and we are meant to coexist with one another. Okay, but unfortunately, because of years and decades, and I would say centuries of conditioning, what happens is that we have now started to realize that relationships are codependencies and not coexistences. Okay, so that has become a little bit difficult for us to break away from, because it's a very prevalent thing. You see it everywhere. So whenever you get into an equation with another person, whether it is a friendship, whether it is even a sibling relationship, whether it is a parent or a lover, spouse, whatever it is you want to see, you almost always look at it from a give and take perspective, that if I give this much, then I should get back this much. Okay, so ideally, if you are able to understand that the concept is you are meant to be independent, whenever you lose your independence, you start to feel frustration. And whenever you feel you're losing your power because the person you are dependent upon is leaving you or going away from you, you are going to start to feel this lack or this loneliness or this very uh, uh, discouraging emotion. Okay. Now, before we go to causes, you need to understand there are types of loneliness also. You have situational lonelinesses, right? Now, this situational loneliness means that I am in a situation very different from the people surrounding me. It can be anything. Okay. It can even be a perceived situation. Okay. So if I was a person who is very anxious and the people around me do not feel the same level of anxiety that I feel, it is producing a situation that is different. Okay. You have proper situations where you are the one single friend amongst married people, or you are the one couple without a kid around amongst couple with a lot with children. Okay. Or in a slightly more serious note, or a more global background, you have gender bias, you have racism, you have casteism, you have all of those things. So those also produce situations. Okay. So it can be something that is very marginal to be being something that is very large. Okay. A very silly example I can give of situational loneliness is when you are that one chota child in a group of large kids. Okay. Especially when we used to go down to play, you'd be either the one really grown up kid, or you'll be that one really small kid where the rest of the group is of the a similar age group and you are kind of left aside. Okay. So situational loneliness can be one thing. You have developmental existential loneliness. Now see, again, the difference is very, it's in fractions. It's very difficult to separate the two. Whenever you go through any kind of development, okay, when you are going through uh, from school to college, going from college to postgrad to work to singlehood to relationship to marriage. Each time you shift your apparent status, you will take some time for you to unmold yourself from the previous circumstance and remold yourself according to this particular circumstance. And invariably, what we do during that particular period is look to people who have already got that status. Okay, so if I'm a single girl, if I want to know what like marriage is, I would ask my married friends for their opinions and for their guidance. And many times you need to know that battle is yours. Help, like I said several times, it's there, but you cannot depend on other people to do the work for you. You need to go through that process. And many times that transitional zone is something that develops a lot of loneliness, because you feel like you're the only one who's going through it and no one really understands what you're going through. Okay, so development and existential loneliness is someone everybody, anyone will go through. And the last is internal loneliness. Now, this is something that is a little bit more pathological, that despite the fact that you have your circumstances, you have people who are helping you out, you have a lot of external factors that are uh, helping you, you still start to feel an internal loneliness. Now, this again sometimes can be transient. All of us go through it. Like in the first few days, you always feel like the first time you come into your sasural, or the first time you are new to your job, because people have already got the bonding with other people around. Na? I mean, now when I joined this particular college for the first time, for a few days I felt lonely, because they already had their equations, they already had a pre-set up thing going on. So till you acclimatize, for you to feel that internal loneliness ki dekha main थोड़ी अलग हूँ सबसे, it is perfectly normal. But then if it tends to perpetuate, then you definitely need to go further and try to understand why it is persisting, despite the fact that the environment is extremely conducive to your you being connected with everybody. Okay, so now that we've established this basis, we can go through causes. Okay, so now there are a few words that are very similar to the ones I have already used. First is existential. Now, this existential is the existential crisis that we go through. What is my purpose of life? What am I doing here? Okay, we all of us at one point in our time, all of us think of all these things. एक time पे ऐसा है कि मेरा मकसद क्या है? Why am I going through this entire rigmarole of this madness of what this world seems? So existential crisis is something that all of us go through. Again, it's very often coincides with the transition that we make. Okay, from I at least felt it a lot during my 12th standard, where I was just wondering, ki, what is this engineering? What is this medicine? What is this arts? I just can't get it. I don't understand what the drama is about, right? So that existential crisis all of us go through. Cultural, like I said, a lot of transitions have happened from joint culture, joint family to nuclear family. So this is a very westernized concept. If you were to ever visit Europe, you will feel the loneliness. Okay, at least people who come from places like India, where you are constantly surrounded by people and people are poking their nose in your business constantly. Yes, it feels very annoying when you are privy to it now, but then when you go there and you see how indifferent people are or how removed from you they are, it is not normal for people to ask for directions. It is not normal for you to ask for assistance from people who just walk by. Nahi to Bombay mein it is so normal. Like if you even have a lost expression, automatically 3-4 people will come to you and ask, "Kya ho gaya? What is happening? Are you okay?" That is a culture that we are used to. But then when you start to see the westernization, the effect of westernization on our culture, it is definitely there are pros and cons to all of it. But then during this transition, it is making it difficult for us to cope, right? Of course, everybody knows in a loss of relationship, it can cause a very strong feeling of loneliness, especially if that person has had a very strong impact in your life. If that is a person you have depended upon for a very big portion, like your parent, your spouse, if you break up, anything, either you lose them by death, you lose them by breaking up, you lose them by shifting. Many times when you were a kid, you would shift schools or you would shift your cities, right? So whenever you have this loss, it is very difficult to overcome because you have already invested in that person for some amount of time. And to think that you will have to restart the entire process and then try to go and do it for someone else itself is very, very draining, right? Just the many times people don't break up or continue to exist in really toxic and very irritating relationships because they just don't want to restart the process and be disappointed once more. So it's like, the known devil is better than an unknown angel. Let me just stick over here. All right. um Situational, I would like to note a couple of things. Like situational is something I think a lot of us face. Okay, any kind of situation. One of the key examples that was spoken about when I was reading up on this was postpartum depression. Okay, which is very unique because motherhood and parenthood is almost always associated with so much of happiness, and it is associated with so much of liveliness because you're bringing a new child into the world. And everybody just so normally what happens is when the lady is pregnant, she's given a lot of importance, she's taken care of, she's usually told not to do too many chores and all of those things. And the moment the baby comes, everybody just rushes only to the child and they just stop caring about the mother. Nobody wants the mother about the amount of energy and work it takes to feed the baby, to take care of the baby, how many hours of sleep she's going to lose. So what happens is the very beautiful picture that was created as of motherhood comes crashing down. And when she realizes the reality is that you have this crying thing in your hand constantly and you have to take care, और वो बच्चा रोता है तो भी तुझे ही सुनना पड़ता है कि क्या कर रही है, why are you not taking care of the child, what are you doing, so it goes on the lines where your expectations and the reality are such stark opposites, and you sort of crash down and realize that it's nothing close to what you thought also. And social contagion is a very severe form of loneliness. Like I said, racism, casteism. We have seen a lot of rebellion in the past few months where you've seen people are retaliating and not allowing it to happen. Now, this is something that is one of those few rare times where the circumstances are contributing actually to loneliness. I think all of us face it at one point of time. For example, when we were, Prachi and I would be able to relate to it because we were the two girls from Bombay in a place where there were a lot of other people from different sectors. So that you would constantly be labeled as a Bombay ki ladki hai, Bombay ki ladki hai, So everybody faces it. I'm not saying that we were specifically targeted. Everybody faces it, but it definitely makes you automatically feel like you're not part of the group. And it will make you feel that you are different and something is wrong in you. That is why you're not being included or you're not allowed that connection. Digital age, I don't think I really need to explain this. Everybody's noses are in their phones on something else because the internet is just less effort and far more entertaining than having to put in effort to make a connection. Because whenever you connect with two people, it's a two-way stream. So you are equally responsible for that connection to remain and to thrive as the other person is. And nowadays, when you have an option of superficiality, you have an option where you get your kicks without having to put in efforts. It just feels a lot easier to ignore reality and look at your digital age. So that is breaking a lot of connections now. Yes, the internet can be used both ways. It can be used to break connectivity, and it can be used to connect to people also. I think the coronavirus has sort of flipped that and allowed us to understand how to connect in a very difficult circumstance where you're not able to physically meet people, but we are now connecting in this digital format. And the last kind of loneliness is self-perpetuating. Now, this is something you really need to understand. When you have undergone a particular negative experience, what happens is that you tend to perpetuate that experience. Okay. So, for example, if you were a child who was very awkward, okay, and you would tend to be clumsy and you would tend to fumble in front of people or embarrass yourself in some sort of way, and you would get feedback from people that, "Arey, you're so clumsy." And what will happen is that that one incident sort of sticks in your brain, and you take it forward. Every time you meet a person, you have that anticipation, I'm going to be clumsy. You land up being clumsy because of the anticipation. The person gives you feedback, and then you just keep perpetuating it. That is why you start to see people say a lot of things. If you've ever had an introduction, many times people will present the negative aspect first. Ki, I'm very clumsy, I'm very silly, I'm socially very awkward. A lot of people use that. And what happens invariably is that before you even get a chance to make a connect, you yourself are slamming down the gates and not allowing people to enter into your field. So even if in front, if I was a person who said, Ki, theek hai, you know what, it's fine, I don't think you're socially awkward at all, I think you're normal, there's, for me, otherwise I would not have even identified it. But just because the person in front has said it, now I will keep my distance. I will say, okay, fine, maybe I should be careful, maybe there's something wrong with this person. And invariably, because of that, people continue their loneliness because they are contributing to their own what do you say, uniqueness or their quirkiness. Yeah, those very extensive causes that are there. But yeah, so I hope you understand that conceptually it is pretty much the same. There are a lot of circumstances that can contribute to it, but definitely it's a lot to do with your own perception and how you take people's reactions in the process.
Thank you, Dr. Vidya. I think that was quite an insightful journey into the different causes of loneliness, because never thought, that there can be divided into three different ways, and inside it there are also so much details and so much ways in how we can the causes of loneliness can be in so many factors. And when you talked about the college example, I could completely relate with it as well. It reminded me of some of my experiences. So we've talked about how the different ways, the different causes of loneliness, how it affects our health. So my next question to Dr. Prachi would be, is loneliness always bad for our health? Like, is it always bad? Can it also impact our health in a positive way, or it is always detrimental towards our health? Dr. Prachi, you're on mute.
See, like how Dr. Vidya had spoken about the basic difference between what is loneliness and what is solitude. So as she spoke about the difference, she very well explained that what is loneliness. Loneliness is basically unpleasant feeling. See, it's a feeling of discomfort, unpleasant, not something which is not very pleasant to our own emotions. So anything which is unpleasant is definitely not good. Okay. So talking about how loneliness affects us in ways of mind and body both. See, like I've been telling, and recent studies and everything has been coming up saying that the mind and body both are connected to each other, right? So when a person is disturbed emotionally, so for example, we'll take loneliness since we are on this topic. If a person is emotionally disturbed because of loneliness, there are certain hormones or there are certain changes which occurs inside the body which can lead to many other different problems. So to make it very clear, let me first segregate it into three parts. So talking about what effect it has on the physical aspect of the body. If a person is feeling lonely, it definitely is disturbed, and this disturbed state of mind will release hormones which are stress hormones. Okay, for giving one example of stress hormone is cortisols. Okay, now this cortisol, for example, in the body or similar sort of hormones causes disturbed immune responses. Okay, so either it will cause reduced immunity, This cortisol level will reduce your immunity, and we know at this time of pandemic, if your immunity is low, you invite a lot of infection, or it will cause inflammatory responses. Inflammatory response means if there is a damage in the body. So if you're lonely, it is kind of a damage to your mind. Okay, so because of this damage, the inflammatory response starts. Now inflammation will is a response which will lead to healing. Okay, now this inflammatory response can lead to many other physical problems, or it invites many other major physical problems like diabetes, blood pressure, heart diseases, and to some extent cancer also. So if a person is emotionally disturbed for a long period of time, then it paves a way for a lot of physical diseases. Talking about emotional aspect, if loneliness persists for a longer time, it definitely gives a way to depression and anxiety. Like Dr. Vidya had very clearly explained that if a child is being told that you are socially awkward, it develops the child develops social anxiety in response to critical criticizing, in response to he being criticized by the opposite person. So if a child is being criticized for his awkwardness, that in response to that, automatically the child will become socially awkward, and he will try, in order to avoid the humiliation of criticism, he will try and be in his own shell and avoid socializing. In turn will lead to loneliness. In turn will develop all these anxiety issues if he is asked to face the public. So where many times we come across a lot of patients who suffer from this anxiety problems, who suffer from social anxiety issues, who suffer from stage fright. Okay, so when you go back into history and understanding where the stage fright has developed, you come to know that, okay, in upbringing and while the child has been growing up, like Dr. Vidya said about the circumstances, something happened in the circumstance or in his environment that has led to that social fear and social anxiety. Similarly, depression. Now, what happens, if a person is lonely for a long time, or he has a poor social connect, it can definitely lead to a lot of low feeling and depression. I think we'll talk about depression in detail. Talking about the effect, loneliness having an effect on cognitive ability. Cognitive ability, to simplify it, is relation to your thinking and action. So if talking about its effect on mind as compared to as in relation to cognitive abilities, we have seen that it also affects your ability to concentrate. It affects your ability to keep attention on minute things. It can also reduce your memory. So you are so involved or absorbed sometimes in your own thoughts that your cognitive ability starts decreasing. So talking about effects of loneliness, of course, any unpleasant emotion, not just loneliness, will have a lot of effect on your mind and body both.
Thank you, Dr. Prachi. So this is how like feelings of loneliness actually impact our physical health, mental health, and emotional health. And we talked about depression. So my next question would also be on the same lines, because loneliness is considered to be one of the major factors that lead to depression and anxiety overall, like it's across the world. So would you like to shed some more light on this?
Yeah. Continuing what I was mentioning about depression and anxiety. See, there are two types of loneliness. Of course, Dr. Vidya had given a different type, all three, four types of classification. But summing it up and broader classification, one type of loneliness is the circumstantial, means transitional, which is temporary, where every person goes through that phase, and it is the situation which is like that every other person who, if he or she is in that situation, will feel lonely, and they kind of come out of it if you work towards it. Okay, so the first classification I would say is where it is transient and where it is temporary, and people come out of it if you take efforts. Okay, If you take measures, simple measures like connecting with other people, you come out of it. But talking about the second classification, where which Dr. Vidya had clearly mentioned about the internal loneliness. Okay, now of course, internal loneliness के लिए भी that has to be an event factor in the person while growing up or in some time in his or her life. So what happens is, you must have, in the discussion even earlier, you had said कि there are people around you yet you feel lonely. Now in such situation, what happens is there is quantity relationship and not the quality. Okay, there is poor quality relationship, and there are people who exist together, but that existing is just existing and not nothing which is intimate, emotional intimacy. So what happens there, that the reason is maybe not external, but there is an internal conflict that leads to this, or internal faulty perception that can lead to this poor quality of relationship. And what happens is, in this is sab chakkar mein na, people try to interact also less, and this becomes a vicious cycle where there is poor quality relationship leading to avoiding of this relationship, and then the person ends up feeling that this relationship is faulty, and to avoid this, and when they are helpless in managing this situation, what is the best outcome, in this situation? Very, very common amongst my patients I have seen, that they themselves become the scapegoat. They blame themselves for the situation around. So they tend to try blame themselves, and the self disgust develops. So there is a lot of self disgust, saying that I am not good enough. That's why this relationship is not working. What is wrong with me that this relationship is not working? Or there is some big problem with me that I have no friends. So in as a defense, the person tries to blame oneself, and the self disgust becomes the biggest scapegoat in having poor relationship. Okay, and talking about this self disgust then further perpetuates and leads to feeling of depression. That's how this unpleasant emotion can pave way to many other psychological problems like depression, anxieties, and can lead to other personality types or faulty personality development. So what we have to focus on is that faulty perception that a person has developed in response to poor relationship. We have to focus on that.
Thank you, Dr. Prachi. So we talked about how this feeling of loneliness can actually culminate into a serious mental health concern or a physical health concern, because it's a mind-body relationship and all of it gets impacted. It's not just one part, and mind and internal and external process, both of them play quite an active role. So with that, I have a question in my mind that how can we actually identify the symptoms of loneliness at an early stage so that we can avoid getting into the serious implications later on?
Correct. Let's first let me make a simple point that loneliness is not equal to depression, but yes, loneliness will mimic symptoms which are similar to depression, and if not worked upon, can then develop into serious mental health problems. Okay, but loneliness is something not diagnosable mental health problem. It's just an entity. So talking about feeling lonely, if a person is feeling lonely, sometimes like initially also in our discussion we have come to know that we understood that some people are not in connect with their own emotions. They don't know that they are lonely. Okay, sometimes I am alone, but that thing doesn't strike that okay, I'm lonely, that's why I'm feeling so and so. So one thing we do, intelligence understanding one's own emotions. Okay, be in touch with our own emotions. So while you are in that process of introspection, you must keep a watch about how you are basically feeling emotionally. So unpleasant feeling, something is not right. You should be able to identify that. Then restlessness, mental restlessness, not physical, mentally बेचैनी feel होना, that common symptoms patients come and say, or any friend of yours will say that मेरे को बेचैनी feel हो रहा है, I'm mentally feeling very restless. Mental fogginess. Mental fogginess means कि a person who, अगर मैं पढ़ने की कोशिश कर रही हूँ और I'm trying to read something, I'm not able to actually concentrate what I'm reading, और मेरा attention नहीं है. So mental fogginess is another one symptom. Feeling low in energy is also something you should look for. Self-doubting, self-criticism, changes in biological factors like sleep. Either you sleep excessively or your sleep is excessively decreased, or eating, binge eating. We have seen that eating too much is kind of a replacement for the lack or the vacuum that is created into one's life. So people fulfill that vacuum by eating. So binge eating is more commonly seen. Of course, there are people who stop eating or they don't enjoy the food in if they're feeling low, but majority of people tend to cover this unpleasant feeling by eating. So binge eating is also one thing that you should look for a warning sign. Unexplained aches and pains in the body. Unexplained pain. सर दुख रहा है, गर्दन दर्द हो रहा है, हाथ दुख रहा है, पैर दुख रहा है, which has no cause and reason. Means तुमने उतना exertion किया भी नहीं है, but your body is still aching. Your body is the best alarming sign to understand that something is wrong with you. So your body will give you signs and symptoms, provided you are ready to look at it. So unexplained pains, and for most is avoiding social gathering. If you don't feel like attending any social events or social gathering, is something also you should think of one of an alarming sign of loneliness.
Thank you, Dr. Prachi. So I guess identifying the symptoms at the right time becomes really important. We talked about this during our stress management session also, that the symptoms come up in the form of, it might be physical, it might be cognitive, it might be in different ways, and we need to identify them at the right time. So my next question was also in terms of how we can avoid becoming a victim to loneliness, and you touched upon the concept of emotions, that we should be in a position to process our emotions in a better way. So would you like to add something more to it?
See, most important in this is what Vidya has initially mentioned for a minute. I don't know if people heard it or not, is forming a relationship which is you coexist at the same time. You are emotionally intimate, but at the same time you are not dependent. The first and foremost thing, or the most important thing to avoid loneliness at any time of any point of time in your life, is to not form any relationship where you are very much dependent on that person. Okay, very much emotionally dependent. Yes, it is. You can have an intimate relationship with a person without being very dependent on that रिलेशनशिप, कि अगर वो इंसान ना हो आपके लाइफ में, या वो इंसान चला जाए, या बट where अगर उसका, if the person is not there, you feel a void, and that void then makes you extremely lonely. ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए. So you should, while growing up or while in further in your life, you should form a relationship which is where you have an intimate relationship, yet you are not very dependent on it. Okay, first thing that you should avoid is being dependent emotionally on anybody. Okay, we had a discussion on open spaces. You can have many friends, or you can build up many relationships according to what suits you the best. So हर इंसान के, one person will not fulfill your all your needs. So आपको, if you feel कि my husband should listen to whatever I say, मेरा husband should care everything I say. If I am bitching about someone, and he should equally bitch about that person with me, अगर मेरा सारा expectation एक इंसान के साथ होगा, then I am severely going to land into disappointment. So one thing is, don't be very much dependent on any person. Second is, don't have too much expectation on any relationship that you are in. If you are expecting too much from one person, you are surely going to get land into depression, on loneliness and disappointment, because one person cannot fulfill all your needs. It's humanly not possible. Okay, he's not God. So you should build up many relationships in such a way that if I want to talk something about, or I'm angry on my boss, so my colleague is there where I can remove my frustration, who's going to understand me better. So second thing is that you unnecessary expectations nahi hone chahiye. Third is your introspection. So knowing your oneself is the best way to avoid loneliness in future. So focus on what best qualities you have in yourself. So even when you are alone, you can nurture it. You can focus on that. Suppose if I am very good at painting and I have just traveled from India to US, and I have no friends and I feel lonely. So what the best way to avoid feeling lonely is to nurture whatever quality I have at that point of time. So I can invest my more time in nurturing my own qualities. Like if I am good at painting, so I will sketch more and try to make myself better at it. So abhi pandemic may be everybody is feeling the same thing. So I think I have seen many people coming up with very good qualities. Someone is singing and someone is dancing and someone. So you nurture your own self in that. Okay, and I think best way to avoid, yes, one very important thing is if suppose you are a parent, okay, it is seen that in a child will not develop the ability to form intimate relationship if he has not learned it how to do it. So if he sees his parents not having that ability to form intimate relationship with each other or with the child does not learn how to do it. So it is very important as parents also to invest into emotional bonding and intimate bonding with oneself and with the child. Otherwise, then the child will again grow up not understanding how to form the relationship. So the social IQ becomes poor. So he does not understand how to form. So as a parent, if someone is a parent in a group, he should focus on also teaching the child, or also demonstrating the child how to bond oneself with someone else. Okay, form a very good relationship with other person. Uh, Yes, I think if a person is in situation like he has changed or in pandemic, you should make goals. Okay, small goals to fulfill it. So you can also set a date with your friend. It's a small date, small plan, or you can make a major plan and which you feel excited about it in the future. तो आपको छोटा मोटा प्लान बनाना चाहिए to so that it short period mein that fulfillness is there, and then that will make you feel happy about it. Or you can make a big plan of कि अभी मैं pandemic खत्म होगा तो I think I'll go on a trip. So you are looking forward for that trip, and that is something that will make you happy and excited about something in future. So all these small things you can do to avoid feeling lonely.
Thank you, Dr. Prachi. Very practical tips, I would say. And we had a question in relation to expectations and attachments also. That is, of course, a very detailed topic in itself. But you touched upon that as well, that unrealistic expectations nahi honi chahiye, like you mentioned. And we discussed it in our open space also yesterday, that expecting everything from one person can be a little burdensome for the other person as well. And in order to build relationships, that is how we expect a person to be, the way we expect them to be might be a little too much for them. So thank you so much for sharing these very insightful tips on how we can prevent getting into these not healthy emotions that might lead to different health concerns later. So before we move ahead, I just quickly wanted to ask Dr. Vidya and Dr. Prachi if we can just move on to the discussions in the chat and the questions in the chat, and then we can move on to the next set of
questions. I'm very curious because there are a lot of chats that I can see, and I'm trying to scroll up and see what are the doubts that is there. So if you can sum it up, then I'll be able to understand better what is the conversation about.
Yeah, the Dr. Vidya was catching up on the chat, and I think because everyone might not be, accessing the chat, so we can quickly discuss on these pointers. So Siddharth had mentioned in the first question was that can loneliness lead to psychosomatic disorders? For which Dr. Vidya replied that yes, any consistent negative emotion can induce an illness. And after that, Sagar had a question that how can one person easily come out of depression and the other can never come out of it? It's a little, I think, quite a broad question. But if you'd just like to mention a point on it, maybe
See,
not.
actually, there's a lot of factors which is dependent upon how one person can come out depression very easily, and another person takes a lot of effort. Everything is dependent upon your own psyche and your own ability to take stress. Okay, one person has if someone has resources around himself, if a person has a lot of resources which can help him to come out of depression, that can again is a very big factor to overcome any emotional disturbances. Whereas again, looking out for resources, a person, similar person who's under depression may not reach out to those resources for help, and may may internalize his own emotion and refuse to take help, or have their own prejudices to come out of it. So self becomes a major factor in coming out of depression. Yes, of course, in spite of trying a lot of remedial help, what lot of counseling and lot of behavioral what we say counseling measures, and in spite of that you are not able to come out of depression, then I think you're suffering from something what is called as clinical depression, and then you require medicinal help. So maybe the first person is at the superficial level, or the internal drive to get better is more, and as compared to the other person who wants to get better, but somehow he is stuck in that mud, and maybe then he requires help of some medicine to get out of it. So what is the major problem, Arjun, is the denial. People are in denial that they require help. People are in denial that they require medicinal help, and depression is easily equated to being mad, which is not true. If going to a psychiatrist is not something where you declare yourself mad, and they feel that it's a social stigma, and the mere thing of refusing such help can again pull you down. So there are many factors which are responsible for overcoming depression. One of the factor is the insight, where you understand what is the problem. Also to mention, see, the thing is, it's such a big topic that I can come up with a lot of points. That one very important topic is the insight. कि problem क्या है? If the problem क्या है is not addressed, then you will never be able to come out of that trap. So you need to look inside and look where the problem is and address to the problem. If my problem is social validation, then I need to understand that my desire to seek social validation is that is making me sad every time. So I don't need to have social validation for me to do something. So a simple problem to identify problem in oneself can lead to better recovery.
Thank you, Dr. Prachi. So I'll keep on moving to the questions.
I'd just like to add a point, if it's all right over here, because
yeah.
since it has come up, since it has come up a couple of times, and Prachi has mentioned it before, that you become your own scapegoat. Now, the thing with psychiatry many times is you don't realize your subconscious processes a lot of times, and that is why when you are in a flux, it's always better to go to a therapist and get help, because therapy doesn't always mean you're going to be fuss out there for 6 months and 1 year or anything. Maybe even 1 or 2 sessions just to clarify what you're going through can help. The second thing is many people take it as a label. Okay, and this does not mean that they're doing it on purpose. I want to make it very clear that people are not doing it on purpose. But then when they have heard once ki, ha, I'm a case of depression. Okay, see, what is happening is that you are already, your brain has kind of got its self circuited in a way to respond to situations with a particular pattern. Okay, so every time your sadness is one of those emotions which is a normal reactive pattern for you, it is likely that it will perpetuate until and unless you don't put a stop to it. So many times, that's why earlier on, there is always it's a double-edged sword to give a person a diagnosis psychiatrically, because it is very scary whether they will continue to perpetuate it on themselves. Okay, so many times when things are not working out in your life and things are not going according to the way you want, many times people will say, oh, I have this problem, that is why it's not going forward. Okay, so that can also be another criteria where the disease apparently does not seem to get better at all. Because yes, externally the patient seems to want to get better, they are approaching people, they are taking therapy, they're doing a lot of things, but internally there is a part of them that is blocked and doesn't want to shift out of that mindset because it makes it a cocoon for them कि हाँ मैं मुझ में कुछ खराबी है ना इसलिए मेरा कुछ हो नहीं सकता है, so that it kind of becomes like a unfortunate defense mechanism for them to continue to use that terminology. So it is very important, like what Prachi said, I think is paramount in any disease, whether it is physical or it is mental. Your will to get better, you absolutely understanding that the position you are in is insufferable and I want to do something to get out of it, is the paramount thing that will help you get better in any situation. There is a term in medicine where they say that we treat, he cures, because it's nothing, like we can only do so much. Doctors can only do so much to help a particular person out, whether it is a physical illness or a mental illness. So it is important to really guide people who you see around you to get instill in them that they need to get better or they can get better. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vidya and Dr. Prachi, for mentioning these pointers. Very important. I can actually relate to every bit of it, and I have a lot of experience, both personal, family, and I have my volunteering experiences in mental health to share. But keeping take care of the time, I'll move to the questions. And Nishivita, you had mentioned. So it's a long question and also a thought that she's mentioning, that is it possible for a child to be critiqued as socially awkward and grow up to love the stage? If this person is still anxious but believes a part of them has owned their flaw, what process might this person have incorporated to fight their idea of loneliness? Maybe we can just put a few thoughts on them so that we can move on to the next set of questions also.
I think there are two really awesome perspectives in this. One is you have to see that negative emotion isn't always bad. Okay. Pain is not necessary. Please let me make this very clear. Pain is not necessary. Everybody says no pain, no gain. All that is rubbish. You can, some people are happy and they are their destinies help them so much that they don't have to go through a lot of the sufferings, but pain is a very powerful teacher. Okay, so many times when you realize that you don't like the situation you are, it can help many times to motivate you into doing things which you never thought you would even consider otherwise. Okay, so for this being, if you're constantly saying so you're socially being socially awkward, there is a part of you that wants to prove to them that no, what you're talking is nonsense, I'm more than capable. But you have to realize how powerful this is, that you are proving to the rest of the world that you are amazing, but then you do not have that, it is not enough to convince you that you are a better person. Okay, so I would like to make it very clear that yes, can negative emotion have positive impacts? Absolutely. But can you see how it is detrimental to your own self-being when you are motivated from that point of negativity? You have to try to shift to a positive connotation for you to enjoy that success. कि इतना सब लोग बोलते हैं, that is something that all of us go through, that people constantly keep giving us positive feedback that you are good, you're good looking, you're amazing, you're good at what you do. All that is fine, but it doesn't hit, it doesn't feel authentic because you have to shift that position within you. Okay, so she is actually, that question was power packed. It was a very, very deep question, and I feel I'm doing it injustice by briefing it to such an extent. Two things: negative emotion can push you to positive, yes, but then try to work on it from within so that you are going to, what do you say, relish the deliciousness of your achievements. Very important. ओके क्योंकि कितना भी तुझे पीछे से फीडबैक मिलेगा, बाहर से फीडबैक मिलेगा, इट इज नॉट गोइंग टू फ्लाई until and unless you also say like हाँ this correct yeah I am good. You should be in that position. Okay,
you know what, Vidya, adding on to what Vidya said, to sum it up, for a person who's socially awkward and he grows up to love the stage, it's kind of a coping mechanism. Okay, so one point, yes, the person is coping up with the social awkwardness by actually going on the stage and doing it so that he is not that socially awkward. He's trying to cope up with this problem. But the major solution will be, as she said, is to actually understanding why he's socially awkward and working on that. Then the coping mechanism will not be necessary. So there are two factors, just to sum up what Vidya has said.
Thank you so much. And with that, I move to the next question. Dr. Varsha has asked in the chat, can loneliness change your personality?
I think the long and short of it is yes, it can. But how it impacts you is going to be it's a very variable question. It can impact you to either, like Nishavita is saying, it can help you go forward, push forward, or it can make you isolated. It can put you into depression. It can do a lot of things to you. Yes. So anything external can indent your personalities. These concepts of fixed personalities is in fact a very big flaw in human understanding. You ideally should understand you get to choose who you are. Okay, you get to choose your attributes, you get to choose your personality traits. Quite frankly, it's up to you. No one else needs to decide it. External influences definitely will impact you, but it will be a combination of your innate personality, your upbringing, and the impact or the intensity of the external factor that will push you into your reactive patterns. Okay, so the same situation can impact a person amazingly, and it can impact them in a very detrimental way.
So there's something called as biopsychosocial model. Students who are there out here can go and read this concept and how, Varsha has asked this question. Varsha, go and read what is called as biopsychosocial model and how it affects one's personality and how it is responsible for any diseases or any disturbance to occur.
Thank you, doctors. I really like the way the discussion is going because we are touching upon the different aspects, not just, of course, the preventive aspect and how there are two ways to look at a particular situation. So not going into the details of it since, again, have to take care of the time as well. So there has been a discussion regarding sweet cravings in the chat, Dr. Vidya, to which you have replied a lot. I will just request you to, if you can please sum it up in a few words, so that
Okay.
all of us can benefit from that.
I'm going to generalize. Bola.
Please, Vidya, go ahead.
I'm going to generalize it a little bit because what Prachi said was absolutely on point. The mind and the body are fully connected, and the body speaks what your mind does not. Okay, very clear. So many times, even as doctors, when we take cases of patient आके बोलता है, अरे doctor कुछ stress नहीं है, but when you see that there are degenerative changes occurring in the body, you know that there's something wrong. Okay, so understand your body is going to show you symptoms of what your mind is craving for. So cravings are one of those things. Sleep is another. Sex is another. Okay, so you are wired to feel good at this moment, at this point of time. So your body or your mind is not going to discriminate whether it is going to have long-term bad effects or not. That is not its problem. That is your higher self or your intellect's problem. Okay, so that is the reason when you're feeling really lousy, you crave for so many good feeling things, like you crave for chocolate, you crave for pizza, you crave for, so none of those things are healthy in the long run. Okay, so what I answered in the chat is, if you're going through an intense phase right now, giving into the craving can have a beneficial effects many times, because it breaks the momentum of the negative cycle and pushes you into a positive cycle because you feel better. Okay, but at the same time, if it is going to become a habit, it is obviously going to have very detrimental effects, because the point is for you to it is meant for you to as a buffer for now, so that your cognitive processes can lead you in the correct direction. Okay, your logic and intellect has to take precedence at one point and then lead you to mold you and get you into better defense mechanisms. But if you continue to perpetuate over here saying that हाँ अभी थोड़ा ठीक लग रहा है, अभी ठीक लग रहा है, and you procrastinate on those developmental procedures, what happens is that it becomes a bad habit. This food is one thing, but the concept, it is the same as far as internet is considered, drugs are considered, alcohol is considered. The concept is the same.
Also to add, someone actually asked about sweet cravings. Just to make them aware, is chocolates, especially amongst the sweet. You see that people binge on chocolates if they are feeling sad, depressed, or lonely, is because chocolates release similar hormones, what we call as pheromones, that is love hormones. So when you are with someone, you feel loved. When it's not there, you try to fulfill that void with chocolates, which is responsible for release of pheromones. And similarly, flavored spicy food, someone mentioned, I think Vidya, you mentioned, spicy and flavored food, or Indian spicy is also responsible for release of pheromones in the body. That's the reason why people indulge into such type of food and binge eating, which will fulfill that void of loneliness and void of love.
Thank you, Dr. Prachi. So before we move on to the next audience questions, I think we'll move on to a few more questions, and then we can again move on to the audience questions. So if you have anything in mind, please keep mentioning it on the chat. So the next question, when we were talking about how to prevent loneliness, so we move on to when a person is having that extreme intense loneliness, the person is suffering through it. So how do you suggest and what do you suggest in order to cope up with that kind of suffering? What might be the right steps or activities that one person can take up?
So, in tune with what Prachi said, first is, especially if you are a person who is outside looking in within looking at a person who's going through the situation, to establish the reason for loneliness is very important, and setting up a basis for relationships and the connectivity that you're looking out for is very important. The one thing I request anybody who's going through any negative cycle, whether it is loneliness, depression, anger, anything, don't do anything that minute. Because many times the intensity of the emotion will drive you to take action, negative or positive, like I said. But the point is, it is almost never going to be a sustainable action. Okay, because you will burn out. All of us can relate to this, that we feel lonely और मैंने अभी decide किया है. I think Tinder is purely marketed because of this kind of frustrating loneliness that people go through. Not just Tinder, but any of your dating apps. Because ऐसा लगता है कि instead of being in this pathetic situation, I at least will deal with somebody for some time. I'll be with somebody for some time, and invariably you'll end up swiping on the most toxic people who exist on this planet. Okay, so I want you all to understand that taking action, especially people oriented action, is something that I would not advise you when you are in the depths of your loneliness, when you're feeling lousy, when you're feeling really pathetic. Please don't try and go for new connections at that time. Okay, what you can do on the flip side is to understand the reason you're feeling miserable or you're feeling lonely is because you're associating company with happiness. If I had someone, I would feel happy. If I had somebody to talk to and understand me, I would feel pleased. Okay, what you can tell yourself at that time is, this is one way of getting happiness. Do I have other ways? The moment you ask that question, you will start to feel the shift inside your perspective immediately. Are people the only way to feel happy? No, I can feel happy when I am listening to music, when I am watching movies, when I am going for a walk. If you are blessed to have pets, please take full advantage of them. That is one, if I ever want to complain about my life, is the fact that I've never been a pet owner. But then if you have animals around you, please associate with them. Going out in nature, doing things, make a list. I would advise you to make lists, not because it is a nerdy thing to do, but when you make it, you will surprise yourself with the amount of things you will come up with. Okay, it is amazing. That's one thing that has always startled me, is not my negative traits, but the fact that I have so much of positivity inside me which wasn't even aware of. Okay, I'm not trying to be modest, but this is the case with everybody. Just because you've been concentrating on the negative aspect for so long, when something positive comes up, it's almost like, oh my god, I did not know, this is awesome. Okay, so it's very important that you understand this. Okay, second is, like I have said, even in my self-love session, is use a dialogue to bring yourself out of it into a better feeling place. Now, when I mean better feeling, I don't mean go from feeling depressed, sad, to feeling joyous, enthusiastic immediately. Okay, I would say that get yourself from feeling sad to a feeling neutral. And by saying this, you can ask yourself certain questions. Am I really lonely? Do I have friends? Do I have people I can rely on? Do I have people who help me out? And 99%, 99.999% of the times the answer is yes, you will have people. Which makes me come to the third point, is if you're a person who is prone to loneliness, or you are in a circumstance that makes you lonely, if you are a student who is studying in a hostel, you are right now, thanks to the coronavirus, if you are somebody who's removed from the situation where you are not in direct contact, it would be advisable to make one more list of people whom you can depend on, people who are close to you, who are your core group, and people you think of the moment you feel sad. Okay, now when you are making this list, like Prachi said, please don't go into stereotyping ki mummy matlab sab kuch, she has to handle all my rubbish. And don't go to the reverse stereotyping also. Many times I would prevent myself from talking to my parents about issues because I would think maa baap hai, kaun baat karega ye sab cheez, like how can I talk to them about boys, or how can I talk to them about some silly things. And then you realize the moment things force you and you don't have anybody else, so you open up to them, you land up realizing they're the chillest human beings on this planet. Okay, so the point is, be sensible about the amount of force you are putting onto the patient, to the person in front. Okay, not everybody is going to fulfill all your expectations. At least personally, from my experience, I know I have a set of friend circle who are just silly and they are a lot of fun. You can depend on them to make you laugh. You have those set of friends who are, really deep, and you can have conversations about life and existence and what the universe is. Then you have those kind of people who are very professional and oriented to discussing your career and things that on those lines. So don't just make a list of people but then segregate them into classes of what. And when you look at it from this perspective, it's like you have a buffet of people. Okay, there are 7 billion people in this world, and for you to feel loneliness, you need to understand is a very much an internal perspective. You are never going to run out of people. Even if you want, especially if you're in India, I doubt you will run out of people at any point of time. Okay. Another advice I would do is get up from your place and move. That is very important, because loneliness many times is associated with stagnation. You feel dull, you feel low, you feel really, you don't really want to get out of that place. So the first thing this is the only time I would say, force yourself to get up and move and walk around that entire, even inside your house, 5 rounds, 10 rounds within the circumference of your house. If you do, you will start to see the moment you move, you start to have your blood flow. Like Prachi saying, exercise releases a lot of pheromones and a lot of good feeling hormones within the body. So start to move and you will see that it will elevate. Okay, are you going to come out of loneliness completely and be completely better? No, but it's definitely going to alleviate your status. And what Sagar has mentioned in the comments is absolutely on point. If your mind can affect your body by bringing it down, understand streamlining the body can bring your mind get your mind to become calm. It's very essential that you know this connection and utilize it to your benefit. Okay. If you can't, if you are one of those unfortunate people who live in small apartments, or if your parents are very strict about having pets, then you can also get plants. I think there's one right behind Achal right now. And you having a living thing next to you, despite the fact it doesn't really have a conversation with you or talk, just having that living presence or any part of nature within your living space can make a huge amount of difference. And just the fact that you're being productive in some way by nurturing something, giving it water on a day-to-day basis and putting a certain amount of effort into it, it's going to give you a lot of positive feedback. Okay. And if you are really still having a bad time, try to get into social circles like volunteering. Again, very good way to get in touch with animals, get in touch with people. And the best part of these kind of equations is they're very superficial. Okay, they are not going to demand a lot from you. They're not going to take a lot of your personality. They're not going to take, you're not going to have to perform the way you would have to perform at work or perform in a personal setup. Okay, so the best part is you're going to meet the unpredictability of meeting people without the tension of having to perform is going to be a very nice setup. It'll excite you and it'll make you want to build connections. Yeah. Yes, I think that's more or less what all you can do during this particular phase.
Thank you, Dr. Vidya. I guess volunteering and service is something which has worked incredibly through my own life, and I can say it with my experience because actively volunteering since childhood, and it works wonders to help people out there to contribute in some manner, and also you meet some amazing like-minded people who you never knew before, and you might never be friends with them to that extent which you might be with some of your friends or colleagues, but you can actually make some incredible relationships out there through the process of volunteering. So I really connect with this, and I always suggest people, of course, it's a choice and people can opt for it. And Dr. Prachi has also mentioned it in the chat. And with that, like we already mentioned, Dr. Prachi had mentioned about the quality and quantity of relationships. That was one question that I had in mind. And she said that invest in quality relationships rather than quantity. So would you have anything to add on to it, or can we move on to the next question?
I think
that has asked a very good. Sorry, Vidya, did I interrupt you? You were going to say something.
Go ahead. I'll add after you're done.
Yeah. So Siddharth has asked a very legit question of, how can someone feel lonely despite being a part of a group, which leads to sense of disconnect or dissociation. So from what was once normal friendship. So if you were friends once with a person and now suddenly you start feeling lonely even when you are around him, you need to question the relationship with the person. You need to think about what has gone wrong with that person. what has gone wrong with the relationship with that person. So just question about the what could be the cause. Okay, so try and connect with the same person, that you don't feel more intimate with that person as you used to feel before. So try and talk it out with the same person. Like I don't think that there were my friends have come and spoken to me like that. I feel the friendship between you and me have gone down, or we are not as close to one another as we used to be, and that has led to clearing out many hidden conflicts, or conflicts which we must have surpassed without clearing it out. So talking out with that friend is a major step towards resolving it. So I had a patient who had a fight with a friend, some jealousy factor which led to fight, and that patient was very honest enough to admit that I was jealous because her so and so was better than mine, and that led to a fight, and I feel very sorry about it, and I don't talk to that person anymore, but I feel very bad. Simple communication with the same person has resolved back things to as it was before. So if you feel that you are not as connected to the same person as you used to, please go and communicate and resolve the conflict that you feel might or might not exist. Sometimes nothing exists, but yet you feel there's a problem. So just clearing out the doubts also can bring things back to normal.
Thank you, Dr. Prachi. So I think the last question, I'll keep it for the end. We have 12 more minutes left. So I think Kalyani also had a question on the same lines when she had mentioned that there might be a situation when there might be people around you, but still you feel at point of time that they don't understand you, and someone who can stand by you and who can pull you out from that particular situation. So that is something on the same lines that we were already talking about. So would you like to add on to that? And Dr. Vidya had also to say something on the last question, I think. Yeah, please both.
Dr.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Vidya, you can go ahead.
So the thing is, my answer kind of keys into both questions to an extent. I think there has to be an understanding as far as this is a multi-layered answer. So please try and bear with me if I go off on tangent. First thing is, expectations of yourself in this process is very important to understand. Many of us have these ridiculous benchmarks कि मुझे कभी मेरे फैमिली मेंबर्स को टॉर्चर नहीं करना चाहिए. I should never be a burden to them. I should never. How many of us hesitate to even admit that I'm feeling low to people whom we are the closest to? The funny part of being a doctor is that it is so easy to get a patient to open up, despite the fact a lot of the students might disagree with us, saying that okay, patients never talk and the case taking is a little difficult. But the point is, the third person perspective, where I'm in a position where the person has absolutely no there's no judgment. The person opens up so easily, and that kind of reflects back on the fact that we tend to have very high benchmarks set up for ourselves, that we are never supposed to feel weak, we're never supposed to crash, we're never supposed to show any kind of vulnerability. Honestly, at a physical scale, if I had to make an association, it was like saying I had fever once in my life, and if I get it again, that means I'm a weak person. I mean, I hope you understand how unrealistic our expectation of not feeling negative emotions or having a somewhat a mental breakdown is. Okay, so first thing you need to understand, in any relationship, the relationship that you have with yourself needs to be prioritized. It needs to you need to be on, what do you say, in comfort with your own self. And when I mean this, I do not mean that you become a baba, you become zen, you become somebody who has no emotions and you're super neutral. But give yourself a little bit more leverage, that okay, I'm not feeling good right now and I need to see what has to be done. Second is, to have an expectation that people will fully understand your perspective is probably not realistic. So like you're saying, even in your friend circle, you have those friends who will relate to you on different aspects of your personality. Okay, so you have friends who share similar music tastes and similar taste in movies. You have similar people in food. Okay, so you divide your friends like that. You know that all aspects of your personality cannot be fulfilled by them. But you realize in a relationship, you expect everybody to understand each and every single thing. Okay, so something that recently I went through is, I would feel that my parents never understood the journey that I'm going through. What I did not realize is my parents did not have awesome parents like I did. Okay, so for them to expect them to understand the kind of difficulty I was going through from their vantage point is, it's impossible. How are you expecting it to happen? So first is understand they may never be on par with you ever. Okay, but what you can do to decrease this is to first sit them down and say. So many times what happens is when you are having this kind of conversation, there's usually a hierarchy. You have a senior person, you have an apparently superior person, elder person, and you are the younger one. Okay, or vice versa. There is a battle of egos. Okay, so if you knowing this, you've attended this chat and you have a background of all of these things, so you are the more mature person in as far as experience is concerned. If you feel hurt by a younger person talking badly to you, you need to understand that an elder person is going to feel worse, much worse, especially if they've seen you in your nappies and they have helped you in your teaching you how to walk and talk. Okay, so for them to have somebody like you come and bash them saying that tujhe kuch nahi samajhta hai, you cannot understand my pain, it is going to give them a backlash. Okay, so the thing is, sit them down, and again, when you are in the heat of an argument, please don't get into a bashing session, and that's where everybody decides ki ab bhi problem solve karna hai. Go and talk to them and tell them that, see, this is my perspective. Now I understand that your circumstances and my circumstances were very different, and I would like to talk. Like Prachi said, many times plain communication can help you just clarify a lot of problems. S- Another thing you need to understand is nobody in their right really wants to hurt. Okay, just like you're hurting, it is likely the person in front is also hurting. So understand that the intention that is set up behind is that everybody wants that harmony and everybody wants things to work out. So if you go from this perspective, instead of thinking that I am not understood and I am not taken care of or I am not loved, if you're going to go and talk from that perspective, you are going to use that words that are more accusatory and they are more jarring. But if you go from the perspective that we are two different people, I have had a completely different upbringing from my parents, right? Completely different upbringing. So if you are going to go from that vantage point ki हम दोनों अलग है, भले सेम फैमिली के हैं. Okay, our bloodline is the same, genetic profile might be similar, but the point is we are two very different people. If you go from that vantage point, the words you use, the terminologies you use is going to shift. And last is, don't stereotype. If your family is for some reason, or the group of people you are close to for some reason is not able to hold the hilt for a certain amount of time, understand you are always going to have other people. Okay, many times my mentors have helped me out, my colleagues have helped me out, my friends have helped me out from situations, because they are just in a better position to listen to me. वो जिद रहता है कि नहीं तुम हो ना, I have chosen you as the one love of my life and you only have to solve all my problems. Understand, it's a very very big ask. You are asking a lot from the person, so try as much as possible to delegate your expectations. Okay, that is a good thing. To not have expectations is probably a little unrealistic. Yes, the first person you should depend upon is yourself, but if you're not able to do it and you need another person's help, delegate the task. Okay, so for example, I've had a patient who's very frivolous, and he tends, not frivolous, but he's very open about his sexuality, and he comes from a family who's very very orthodox and traditional, and he keeps trying so hard to convince his mother that being in an open relationship is normal. I mean, how can you expect that gap to be bridged? Okay, so in certain cases, to have a certain level of understanding that being different it is okay for us to be different in our opinions and still coexist is very very important. I hope I did not diversify too much.
Thank you, Dr. Vidya. Dr. Prachi, you had something to add on to this? You're on mute, Dr. Prachi. Dr. Prachi, you're on mute.
Actually, thing is, I got disconnected completely, and I was trying to log in, so I completely missed the point what Vidya had said. So I don't know what she has mentioned and what. I really apologize for that.
No problem at all. So we have a few questions, one from Megha and one from Siddharth, and they are quite in detailed questions. So if we have the time, then maybe we can take it right now, or maybe we can take it offline. What do you suggest? So Megha, I'll just read it out. So
Yeah, I
Megha,
think a couple of questions are good now. Now we can do it.
Yeah, so Megha had a question. So it is quite broad. So you can just mention your thoughts, and maybe after that we can take it offline. Sometimes negative experiences like loneliness or disappointments because of expectations can also lead us to introspect and move further. But it becomes really difficult to push mind as it overrules and we keep overthinking. How to deal with that? Maybe just your few thoughts. I know it's quite we can talk a lot about it, but maybe some pointers that you can mention at the moment on how we can push, the mind doesn't overrule at that point of time.
I think one factor again, it keys on to the same thing that you'd want to break momentum at that point. Okay, don't try to solve every problem right now, because if you've honestly, if you're very truthful to yourself, you haven't solved a problem for 6 months or 7 months by the time you've come to this point of being frustrated. So ideally, I would say that at that point, try to break your momentum by doing something. हाथ का कुछ भी काम करोगे ना, like you even do something like painting your nails, get into stitching, doing something that is very focused will help you stop your mind from uh, going into that cycle. Okay, so that's one thing. And all the other processes that we have mentioned, they are not just for loneliness, they're pretty much on any negative pattern or negative cycle. So I want you to at least use a sentence that says that I'm running a marathon, I'm not running a sprint, I don't have to finish everything now. Time lagega, endurance lagega, it will happen. Okay, so the moment you say that and remove the time factor from your problem, in the sense that you say that I don't need to get better just now, like fully better, completely healed, you will automatically remove that pressure of having to get out of the situation. And many times when just that one factor is taken out, you automatically start to improve.
Also, I think to add on mindfulness techniques will also help you remove your negative emotions. So, if you have certain negative emotion, acknowledge it. Yes, I'm having or I'm feeling it, but let it pass. Let it pass through and not don't harbor it in your body. So, just recognizing, accepting, and letting it go is one mindful technique one should use if even after coping up, you are still disturbed by those negative feelings.
Thank you, Dr. Prachi. So Siddharth has just added on to his thoughts about what he had mentioned, that the disconnect which he was trying to refer when he was talking about a group was like they have moved on and there is a sense of exclusion, which is not really the case. Which is my follow-up question of this is feeling of loneliness, like is this feeling of loneliness self-imposed? It has been compounded with the emotion of man nahi lag raha hai, which feels like it stems from self, and the entire package is an amplified loneliness. If you'd like to add your thoughts onto this, that loneliness is it self-imposed and it might get amplified. You can also read it. It's just second last question
No,
on
I
the
can't see any chat. Can you please paste it again because I'm difficultly understanding it.
No,
Yeah.
I'll just help you out over here, because it is on line with what Prachi had spoken about, scapegoat of yourself many times. See, whenever you have undergone a negative experience, what happens is that you tend to avoid it. Okay, it's like being burnt once. You're not going to really you're going to think twice before you come close to an open flame. So it's pretty much on the same lines. And when it happens on a consistent basis, where you apparent expectation has been received by disappointment time and again, what will happen is many times your inner self or your more primal self will prevent you from seeking those same patterns again and again, so that you know कि वापस लगना नहीं चाहिए. Okay, so many times when you say that कि मन नहीं लग रहा है, your मन is basically saying कि बेटा वापस लात मिलेगी तो मत जाओ वापस. I'm being very frank about it. Okay, so often what happens is that once I have already felt been bruised, I will think 50 times before I take the same step. But that very childish mechanism that is present in all of us, it's universal. You need to know that if you continue on that line, what will happen is you're going to miss a lot of other opportunities that are present. So uh, again, speaking to a person who has either a background on this line, or speaking to yourself by saying ki, let's see, dekha jayega, let's at least give it a shot and we'll see what has to be done. I am different from that person. I know a lot more right now. It is a completely different scenario, and let's see how to progress further.
Thank you, Dr. Vidya. So I guess keeping take care of the time that we started from loneliness and we actually moved on to different aspects of mental health, physical health, and also various behaviors. And there are so many factors that actually contribute towards our well-being today. And there are a lot of pointers that I can mention. Very great learnings that, of course, we'll be sharing through our social media handles also in the days to come. So one last question that I would have from my end would be that we all hold a strong responsibility so that no one comes and goes through these type of intense loneliness. Being more aware and compassionate towards people, especially during the times of crisis in their lives, is very important. So what would be your thoughts on the same? Like, I strongly connect with this thought. So I will just want to know what's your thoughts on the same. Both of you can share your thoughts.
Yeah, thing is as to have a intimate relationship, we must also invest into one relationship. So if you find someone or your friend who's having difficult time, you should give a shoulder for that person, or not even shoulder. If the person is in a trouble, reach out to him and ask him what the problem is. So asking out and reaching out itself is a very good thing to develop a good bond. And if you see someone who's reaching out to you for help, okay, the first and the most simple thing that you can do is listen. Listening is a very good art which does not require a lot of mehnat, but it is very helpful in healing. So listen to your friend's problem. If he or she is having a difficult problem, listen to what he or she is saying, and without judgment. Don't give your judgment. अरे यार क्या कुछ भी फालतू सोच रही है. You are absolutely wrong. Whatever you are thinking, this is going to push back the person into a shell, and he will go into a very guarded situation. So without judgment, listen to whatever a person is saying, because at their position they are right, in their situation they are right. So just listen to that person's problem, give a listening ear. आप सुनो, वो जो बोल रहे हैं वो पूरा सुनो and actively सुनो. ऐसा नहीं कि the person is talking and you are on your mobile phone. The person is talking and you are busy writing something and you're just nodding your head, ha ha, bol. This is a very bad body language. So your body language should be such that you are actually interested in listening to the person, what he or she is saying. So your full attention to be towards the person who's saying his problem, including gestures and body language which is positive towards that person. Also, invest actively means ask more about the problem. If you question something about his problem, that will again make the person feel that okay, there's someone to understand my problem, or there's someone who's trying to understand what I'm going through. So I ask active question also after you're done with listening, or just nod okay, yeah, and try and validate your friend's feeling. Okay, validate the feeling. Yeah, okay, I understand what you're going through. Yeah, it is a very difficult situation for you, what you're going through. I am so proud that you are handling it so well. Just validate the feeling. That itself is a very great healing gesture towards your friend's problem. Then what you can do is, if suppose many times it can happen that as a health professional also, or in future if someone becomes a counselor, or if you have a close friend who's having difficult times and who's reaching out to you again and again and has kind of become dependent on you, and it is taking a very overwhelming toll on you, and you're feeling like it is emotionally draining you out. Sometimes what we do is we totally shoo the person off कि नहीं सुनना है. We don't take their calls, or we avoid. That's a very bad gesture to anybody, because again that person will go into that loneliness cycle कि अरे मेरा कोई है नहीं सुनने के लिए. Instead, what you can do is, if you are overwhelmed with the emotions, you can reach out to other networks. So you can form a network of people who can help the person. So अगर आप available नहीं हो, to see to it there's someone else who can attend to that problem. If you are not in that state of mind to listen, you can reach out to someone else. See, listen, so and so person is not well, I am not able to attend, please speak to that person. You should form a network, so that only one person is not burdened with someone's problem. Form a network. Then encourage the person to, if the issue is a lot, encourage the person to reach out to a therapist. Support the person to go and contact a counselor or go and contact a doctor if he or she requires medicinal intervention. So support. Okay, I'm there. You go reach out for help if you are not able to help the person out or give a proper solution. Uh, Also, casually make note of things, or if the person is feeling too low or got self criticism है person के अंदर, make a note of positive things and casually point it out कि I like the way you are so empathetic towards others. I like the way you are so caring towards others. अगर आप positive point उसका note करके and time to time casually if you mention the person also feels कि yeah, the person opposite person is not trying to console by just giving sweet talks, but he or she actually feels that there is something positive in me. So that is one activity as a friend you can do to help the person out. Also, if a friend is in trouble, don't directly jump in giving solutions. Maybe some people are not equipped enough or emotionally mature enough to understand and help out emotionally. But what one simple thing a person can do is he ask the person after he or she is done finishing with telling his problem. You can simply ask the person, "Ki, what now?" After narrating the entire situation, what do you feel about it? Or what do you feel about the entire incidents? And once the person, if you are asking that person, "Ki, what do you feel?" then the person takes a step back. "Ki, "Arey, हाँ," he or she then makes effort to think about the entire situation. "Ki, "Arey, I think it was injustice towards me." So if the person says if okay, he feels it was a big injustice towards him, then try and address that injustice in the person rather than giving a solution which may or may not be helpful. Because some people come to you just so that he can share and not ask for solution. So what you can do is guide the person rather than giving the solution. You can guide the person in self introspection and you can guide the person in finding the solution for their own self. I think these are the basic simple tips when you are at the receiving end.
Thank you, Dr. Prachi. Any final words from you, Dr. Vidya? We'll end in another 2 minutes. So
Yeah, so I just wanted to make one last point because it's something
yes.
that we really get into, because actually more often than not, apart from not helping, I think we're too enthusiastic to help. I think Prachi has noted down that you shouldn't be too quick to give a solution to the patient. And the second thing is the relatability issue that comes ki arey same thing mere saath hua hai, and you go off on a tangent into your story. Or the thing is, whenever you say that I feel the same thing, you feel like you're trying to be relatable, but what happens is you're taking away their thunder. Okay, it feels many times when you're on the receiving end of this kind of conversation, they will feel कि you are trying to neutralize their thing and you don't understand कि वो कितना किस intensity से हो रहा है. So ideally, like she said, let them speak it out completely and try to use certain sentences that will incorporate the importance of their difficulty. So you can use words like, I cannot imagine what you are going through, but a similar situation happened with me. If you want to just note one sentence about it, don't tell the entire kahani at that point of time, and tell them that maybe I can understand and I can try helping you out, and these are the methods that help me at that point of time. But understand, this is baad mein ka. Okay, when the patient is or the person is in that in the flow na, don't try to break their intensity. And what she's saying also, casual is so important. When you're trying to tell them nice things about themselves, casual is of paramount importance, because you're very emphatic. No, you are an awesome person. The first thing the person will do is to say, nahi, aisa kuch nahi hai. Even if they don't do it externally, the first thing is they will rebel against what you are saying. Okay, because they are not receptive to your those positive words at this point. Okay, so be careful. There are no hard and fast rules, but main thing is give them the limelight for till they finish narrating their incident completely, and then start to incorporate methodologies to bring them out of it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vidya. And like you mentioned about being casual, so Siddharth has also mentioned his views on the chats. And I agree as well that compassion and empathy is something I really promote. It's the core value that I try to practice. And it is a point, like we have done various case studies also on that people would always be suspicious of compassionate people because either they think that, someone is trying to take advantage, or there are different ways, not going into the details of it. So maybe we can start, and then being a person, like if you practice something and they actively see you doing that, then everybody gets the idea that, okay, yes, you can see someone practicing it, and then you can also inculcate those values inside you. So thank you so much. I think we have a lot more to discuss actually. Maybe in future we can decide on, another specific topics. And the idea of taking loneliness was because we talk about preventive healthcare, and loneliness is one major area through which we can lead into different health concerns, and that's why it was important to discuss, especially during the time of pandemic. And thank you so much, it was really insightful. I think we went on different tangents and everything was really important. I think most of the people would be able to connect with whatever was discussed here, because we have our own personal experiences. We might have faced these situations, or we might have helped people across these situations. So thank you so much. And thank you, audience. Like, it's 11 minutes after 6 and you're still there. Thank you so much for your patience. Such an important topic for the discussion. And my extreme gratitude to Dr. Vidya and Dr. Prachi for taking out the time and sharing your insights. So with this, we would like to end our session for today, and we'll keep you posted on the further sessions. And looking forward for more such insights. We are in a connected world. Communication and connection is very important. At the same time, taking care of ourselves is extremely important, because we need to have a really good relationship with ourselves, and that is how we can also have a beautiful relationship with the world around. So thank you so much, people. Thank you for your presence. I wish you a wonderful evening ahead, and look forward to see you guys again.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.